I want more, German woman tells other women about her first kiss with a black soldier. April 23rd, 1945. Camp Ruston, Louisiana. The transport truck lurched to a stop, and Liesl Miller pressed her face against the wooden slats, trying to glimpse what awaited her. Through the gaps, she could see electric lights blazing everywhere, illuminating a compound that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. 22 years old, captured 3 weeks earlier near Aachen as she fled westward with a column of retreating Wehrmacht soldiers, Liesl had spent the Atlantic crossing preparing herself for what Nazi propaganda had promised awaited German prisoners in America. The stories had been specific and terrifying. American soldiers, particularly the black ones, were savages who would show no mercy. Women prisoners would face unspeakable brutality. The democratic weakness that Hitler had mocked for years would manifest as cruelty toward the defenseless. Liesl had repeated these certainties to herself during the voyage, building walls of hatred to protect against the horror she expected to face. The truck's tailgate dropped open. An American sergeant stood there, his uniform crisp despite the humid Louisiana night. He spoke in broken German, gesturing for the women to climb down slowly. Liesl noticed his hands remained at his sides, not reaching for weapons. She descended on shaking legs, joining 15 other German women on the gravel. What struck her first was the food smell drifting from a nearby building. Real coffee, not the acorn substitute she had drunk for 3 years. Bread baking, the yeasty aroma unmistakable. Her stomach clenched with hunger she had learned to ignore. An American officer approached, a woman in her 30s wearing captain's insignia. She spoke in perfect German, her accent suggesting she had studied in Berlin before the war. You are prisoners of war under the protection of the Geneva Convention. You will be treated with dignity and respect. You will receive medical care, adequate food, and shelter. No harm will come to you here. Liesl wanted to spit at this propaganda, these obvious lies designed to lower their guard before the real treatment began. But exhaustion and hunger had dulled her defiance. She stood silent as the women were led into a processing building. The shock began with the medical examination. The American doctor, another woman, examined each prisoner gently, explaining every step in careful German. She treated an infected cut on Liesl's arm with genuine concern, applying sulfa powder and clean bandages. Liesl had not seen such medical supplies since 1942. Then came the showers, hot water, unlimited soap, clean towels. Liesl stood under the spray for 10 minutes, unable to process this reality. In Germany, civilians received 1 bar of soap monthly when available. Here, American guards handed out fresh bars as if they grew on trees. The barracks were heated. Each bunk had sheets, a pillow, 2 wool blankets. Electric lights burned steadily overhead. No rationing, no blackout curtains. Liesl chose an upper bunk near the window, claiming a small territory in this impossible place. At 2100 hours, they received dinner. White bread with butter, hot soup thick with vegetables and meat, milk in glass bottles, and cookies for dessert. Liesl ate mechanically, her mind refusing to accept the evidence her senses provided. Anneliese Zimmer, 34 years old, a party member from Munich, sat beside her. "This is propaganda," she whispered fiercely. "They fatten us for some purpose. This kindness is a trap." Liesl wanted to believe her. Believing meant maintaining the certainties that had sustained her through war. But her full stomach and clean skin whispered different truths. She lay in her bunk that first night, staring at the electric light burning steadily above, and felt the first crack appear in everything she thought she knew. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now, back to the story. April 24th, 1945. The morning bell rang at 6 o'clock, a gentle chime rather than harsh shouting. Liesl woke in confusion, momentarily forgetting where she was, then remembering with a sick lurch. American captivity. Yet she had slept through the night, undisturbed, warm, and safe. Breakfast arrived at 7. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast with jam, fresh orange juice, and coffee with real sugar and cream. Liesl counted 12 strips of bacon on the serving tray for 16 women. In Germany, her family's monthly meat ration had been 10 ounces per person when available. Here, enemy prisoners ate meat for breakfast. The dining hall itself revealed more impossible abundance. The tables were clean, the benches sturdy. American guards ate at a separate table, their portions identical to the prisoners. Liesl watched them laugh and joke, their casual ease disturbing her more than cruelty would have. These men showed no signs of the degeneracy Nazi propaganda had promised. After breakfast, a camp administrator explained the daily routine. Prisoners could work voluntarily in camp facilities for 80 cents daily, money they could spend at the camp canteen. Those who chose not to work would still receive full rations. Medical care was available at any time. Letters could be sent home through the Red Cross, 1 per week. Liesl's mind reeled at this information. Paid labor for prisoners? Medical care for enemies? The rules made no sense according to everything she had been taught about American brutality and disorganization. At 10 o'clock, the women were escorted to the camp canteen to witness what they could purchase with their earnings. Liesl walked through the door and stopped, unable to process what she saw. Shelves stocked with candy bars, chocolate, cigarettes, toiletries, writing paper, magazines. A refrigerated case held soft drinks in bottles, ice cream bars, fresh fruit. The prices seemed impossibly low. A Coca-Cola cost 5 cents. A Hershey bar cost the same. "They mock us," Annalisa hissed beside her, "showing us these things we cannot afford." But Liesl was calculating. 80 cents daily meant 16 items at 5 cents each. The Americans were offering prisoners the ability to buy abundance, not displaying it as torture. That afternoon, Liesl volunteered for work duty in the camp laundry. She needed to understand this place, and work provided observation opportunities. The laundry facility had electric washing machines, gas-heated dryers, unlimited soap and bleach. She worked alongside an American woman, a civilian employee who chatted pleasantly in broken German about her family, her home in Ruston, her hope the war would end soon. "You are not afraid of us?" Liesl asked, her English halting but functional from school lessons years ago. The woman looked genuinely confused. "Afraid? Why would I be afraid? You're just people. This war wasn't your fault any more than mine." This casual dismissal of propaganda, this refusal to hate, felt more dangerous than any weapon. Liesl had been taught that Americans were enemies because they were fundamentally different, inferior, threatening. But this woman spoke to her as an equal, another person caught in circumstances beyond her control. That evening, Liesl received her first wages. 80 cents in American coins. She held them in her palm, feeling their weight, their reality. At the canteen, she bought a Coca-Cola, a candy bar, and writing paper. The cold sweetness of the cola shocked her tongue, a taste she had never experienced. The chocolate melted rich and smooth, nothing like the ersatz products she had known in Germany. She sat on her bunk that night, writing a letter home that she knew might never arrive. How could she explain this place? How could she tell her mother that America, the enemy, had treated her with more dignity than her own government had shown in the war's final desperate months? Annalisa watched her from across the barracks. "You are adapting too quickly," she said, her voice cold. "Remember who we are. Remember what they have done to our country." But Liesl remembered other things now, The hunger in German cities, the bombed homes, the endless death. And she remembered this morning's breakfast, offered without malice to defeated enemies. April 26, 1945. The evening air in Louisiana felt thick and warm, nothing like the spring weather Liesl had known in Germany. She walked the permitted path between her barracks and the mess hall, enjoying 15 minutes of outdoor time before curfew. The camp sprawled across what must have been farmland before the war, electric lights marking the boundaries like artificial stars. She noticed him for the first time near the corner of Building 7. A soldier standing guard duty, his posture relaxed but alert. Even in the dim light, Liesl could see his skin was dark. Her breath caught, and old fears surged through her chest. The propaganda films had been specific about Black American soldiers, painting them as dangerous and primitive. The soldier turned, and their eyes met. Liesl looked away quickly, her heart pounding. She expected him to shout, to approach threateningly. Instead, he simply nodded, a gesture so normal and respectful that it confused her more than hostility would have. "Good evening," he said in careful German, his accent thick but understandable. Liesl froze, uncertain whether responding would invite danger. The soldier seemed to sense her fear. He took a step backward, giving her space, his hands visible and empty. "I am Private James Clark," he continued, switching to English. "You are safe here. I promise this." She understood the English, had studied it for 4 years in school before the war, made such education seem like collaboration with enemies. But understanding words and believing them were different things. She managed a small nod and hurried past, feeling his eyes follow her, not with menace, but with something that might have been concern. That night, Liesl lay awake, thinking about the encounter. Private James Clark had treated her with courtesy, had stepped back to ease her fear, had promised safety. These were not the actions of the savage the propaganda had described. But accepting that meant accepting that she had been lied to about this too, that another piece of her certainty was false. The next evening, April 27th, Liesl took the same walk. She told herself it was coincidence, that she simply wanted outdoor time. But part of her, a part she did not want to examine, wondered if he would be there again. He was standing in the same location, and this time he smiled when he saw her. The smile transformed his face, revealing gentleness that made Liesl's carefully constructed fears seem foolish. "Good evening, miss," he said, this time in English. "Beautiful night." Liesl found herself responding before she could stop herself. "Yes, very warm." "You speak English well," he said, his tone encouraging rather than surprised. "I studied, before the war." The words came slowly, her accent heavy. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Private Clark reached into his pocket and withdrew something wrapped in brown paper. He held it out to her, keeping his distance. "Chocolate," he said simply. "From the PX. I thought you might like some." Liesl stared at the offered package, her mind spinning. This was forbidden, certainly, a guard giving gifts to a prisoner. But more than that, it was an act of kindness from someone she had been taught to fear above all others. Her hand trembled as she reached out and accepted the chocolate. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are welcome." He nodded again, that same respectful gesture, and returned his attention to his duties. Liesl walked back to her, barracks clutching the chocolate, her world tilting on its axis. Inside, she unwrapped it carefully. A Hershey bar, the label bright and cheerful. She broke off one square and let it melt on her tongue, the sweetness mixing with salt from tears she had not realized were falling. Annalisa found her there, sitting on her bunk, crying over chocolate. "What happened?" she demanded. "Did someone hurt you?" "No," Liesel managed. "Someone was kind." She could not explain, could not make Annalisa understand that kindness from an unexpected source hurt more than cruelty would have. Cruelty she could process, could use to reinforce her beliefs. But kindness required her to question everything, to acknowledge that perhaps the enemy was not who she had been told to hate. April 28, 1945. Liesel volunteered for additional work duty, telling herself it was for the extra money. The truth, which she barely admitted even in private thought, was that evening work shifts meant walking past Building 7 around the time Private Clark's guard duty began. He was there again, and this time she did not look away when their eyes met. He smiled that gentle smile, and she found herself returning it, a small, hesitant expression that felt like betrayal of everything she had once believed. Over the following days, their evening conversations grew longer. Private Clark spoke of his home in Mississippi, a place he described with complicated emotions. He told her about cotton fields that stretched to the horizon, about poverty that made German hardship seem almost comfortable, about laws that treated him as less than human in his own country. "You fight for them," Liesel said on their 5th conversation, May 2nd. "Even though they treat you this way?" "I fight for what America could be," he answered. "Not for what it is. I fight because my people deserve freedom too, and maybe this war will help us get there." This concept dizzied Liesel. She had fought, in her small way, because she had been told it was her duty, because propaganda had promised German supremacy would bring order and prosperity. Private Clark fought despite injustice, hoping for change rather than dominance. The moral clarity she had once possessed was dissolving into uncomfortable complexity. He asked about her life before the war. She told him about Dresden, about her father's bookstore, about university studies interrupted when women were needed in factories. She described the slow degradation of normal life, the increasing hunger, the fear that became constant background noise. "I believed what they told us," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "About Americans, about you especially. I was taught to hate." "I know," he said simply. "We were taught things too, but hate is learned, and it can be unlearned." May 4th brought rain, warm Louisiana rain that fell in sheets. Liesel stood under the barracks overhang, watching water turn the compound paths to mud. Private Clark appeared beside her, also seeking shelter during a patrol break. They stood in silence, listening to the rain drum on the metal roof. The noise provided privacy their previous conversations had lacked. Liesel felt emboldened by the isolation, by the way the rain made them the only two people in a gray world. "Why are you kind to me?" she asked. "I am the enemy. My country has done terrible things." He was quiet for a long moment, considering. "You are not your country," he finally said. "You are Liesel, a person. I see a young woman far from home, confused and scared. I see someone who was lied to, same as I was lied to about different things. I see someone capable of changing, of learning." "How do you know I am capable of changing?" "Because you are here, talking to me. Because you took the chocolate. Because you are asking questions instead of clinging to what you were taught." He turned to face her fully. "Change takes courage. You have courage." Liesel felt something shift inside her chest, a physical sensation like ice cracking. She looked at Private Clark, really looked at him, and saw not the monster of propaganda but a man. A good man who showed kindness to enemies, who endured injustice with grace, who believed in possibility despite evidence of human cruelty. "I want to understand," she whispered. "Everything I believed is wrong. I do not know what is true anymore." "Truth is simple," he said. "People are people, Some are good, some are bad, but the goodness or badness has nothing to do with where they are from or what they look like. It is about how they treat others, about whether they choose kindness or cruelty. The rain began to lighten. Their private moment was ending. Liesl felt desperate suddenly, unwilling to return to the confusion of her barracks, to Annaliese's hostile certainty, to the discomfort of transformation. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked. "I will be here," he promised. May 6th, 1945. Europe, thousands of miles away, was celebrating victory. Germany had surrendered unconditionally. The news reached Camp Ruston that morning, spreading through both prisoners and guards like wildfire. Liesl heard it in the mess hall at breakfast and felt her world collapse completely. Germany had lost. Everything her country had sacrificed, everyone who had died, all the suffering and destruction had been for nothing. The 1,000-year Reich had lasted 12 years and ended in absolute defeat. She should have felt devastation, but instead she felt a confusing mixture of relief and grief. Anneliese took the news differently. She raged in the barracks, cursing Americans and Russians, insisting the reports were lies. Other women wept openly or sat in shocked silence. The camp administration, anticipating reactions, kept prisoners confined to their barracks for the day, allowing time for emotions to settle. But that evening, perhaps understanding that fresh air might help, guards allowed the women their usual outdoor time. Liesl walked to Building 7 in a daze, operating on autopilot. She needed to see Private Clark, needed his steady presence to anchor her in this new reality. He was there, and his expression showed concern when he saw her face. "You heard?" he said softly. She nodded, unable to speak. "I am sorry," he said, and the sincerity in his voice undid her. She began to cry, not the careful, silent tears she had shed over chocolate, but deep sobs that shook her entire body. The war was over, her country destroyed, and she was crying in front of an enemy soldier who had shown her more humanity than her own government ever had. Private Clark looked around, confirming they were relatively alone in the twilight, then stepped closer. "It is okay," he said quietly. "You can grieve. Loss is loss, even when it is complicated." "I should be glad," Liesl gasped between sobs. "The war is over. No more death. But I feel lost. Everything I believed, everything I was taught, it was all lies. My country was evil, and I did not see it. I did not want to see it." "You see it now," he said. "That is what matters. You have the courage to face the truth. Many people never find that courage." She looked up at him through tears. This man who should have been her enemy, who had become something she could not yet name. "You have been so kind to me. I do not deserve your kindness." "Everyone deserves kindness," he said firmly, "especially people who are learning to leave hate behind." The words hung between them, carrying weight beyond their simple meaning. Liesl realized she was standing very close to him now, close enough to see the compassion in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence in the cooling evening air. "I want to understand," she said again, repeating words that had become her prayer. "I want to be better than what I was taught to be." "You already are," he said gently. Then, moving with careful slowness that gave her time to step away if she chose, he leaned down and pressed his lips softly to her cheek. The kiss lasted barely a second, chaste and respectful, but it sent lightning through Liesl's entire body. She stood frozen as he stepped back, his expression uncertain, as if worried he had overstepped. "I am sorry," he began. "I should not have—" "No," Liesl interrupted, her voice shaking. "Do not apologize." But inside her mind was screaming. A black man had kissed her. A man she had been taught to see as subhuman had shown her tenderness, and instead of revulsion, instead of the horror propaganda had promised she would feel, she felt warmth. She felt gratitude. She felt something dangerously close to joy. "I should go," she whispered, not because she wanted to, but because she needed to think, needed to process this moment that had shattered the last remnants of her old beliefs. "Tomorrow?" he asked hopefully. "Tomorrow," she confirmed. Liesl walked back to her barracks in a daze, her hand pressed to her cheek, where his lips had touched her skin. The kiss had been innocent, a gesture of comfort and connection. But it had accomplished what military defeat could not. It had completed her transformation from who she had been into someone entirely new. In her bunk that night, surrounded by women grieving Germany's surrender, Liesl touched her cheek and whispered words that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. "I want more." May 8th, 1945. Liesl woke with her fingers pressed to her cheek, tracing the spot where Jim's lips had touched her skin. 2 days had passed since Germany's surrender. 2 days since that innocent kiss that had detonated everything she thought she understood about herself. The barracks felt smaller now, suffocating. Annalisa and the other women clung to their anger and grief, turning the space into a shrine of resentment. They spoke of returning to Germany to rebuild, to restore what had been lost. But Liesl wondered what they would rebuild. The lies, the hatred, the certainty that had led to such destruction? She volunteered for kitchen duty that morning, needing work to quiet her mind. The American staff treated her kindly, explaining tasks in simple English, thanking her for help. A black woman named Dorothy worked alongside her, peeling potatoes with efficient grace. Dorothy hummed while she worked, a melody that sounded like church music. "You sing beautifully," Liesl said hesitantly. Dorothy smiled, her face lighting up. "Thank you, honey. My mama taught me that hymn. She said music makes hard work easier." They worked in comfortable silence after that, and Liesl found herself studying Dorothy's easy confidence. This woman moved through the world with dignity despite living in a country that, according to Jim, treated her as less than equal. How did she maintain such grace? That evening, Liesl walked to Building 7. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had spent the entire day thinking about Jim, about the kiss, about the feelings blooming inside her chest like dangerous flowers. He was there, and his face showed relief when he saw her. "I was worried you would not come." "I almost did not," she admitted. "I am frightened." "Of me? Of myself? Of what I feel?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Jim glanced around, confirming their privacy, then stepped closer. "What do you feel?" Liesl struggled to find language for the chaos inside her. "Confusion. Shame. But also something else. Something that makes me want to see you, to talk to you. Something that makes that kiss feel like the most honest moment of my life." "There is no shame in connection," Jim said softly, "in seeing another person's humanity." "But I was taught. I know what you were taught. I was taught things too, that I was less than other people because of my skin, that I should accept cruelty as natural, that I should be grateful for scraps." His voice carried old pain. "But teaching something does not make it true." Liesl looked at him fully, really seeing him, the kindness in his eyes, the strength in how he held himself, the patience he showed her despite having every reason to be bitter. "You are a better person than I am," she whispered. "No," he said firmly. "I have just had more time to learn that hate only hurts the person carrying it. You are learning fast." They talked for an hour that evening, about small things and large ones. Jim described his mother's cooking, the smell of biscuits on Sunday mornings. Liesl told him about her father's bookstore, how she had loved the smell of old paper and leather bindings. They discovered shared loves of music and poetry, found common ground in their hope that the world might become something better than what they had known. When the evening bell rang, signaling curfew, Liesl felt desperate at the thought of leaving. These conversations with Jim had become the only honest moments in her life. Everything else felt like performance, like playing a role she no longer believed in. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Every tomorrow," he promised. Walking back to the barracks, Liesl understood that something fundamental had shifted inside her. She was not just questioning propaganda anymore. She was building something new, a way of seeing the world that had Jim at its center. The realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. May 10th, 1945. Liesl was assigned to work in the camp administrative office, filing paperwork and organizing supply requests. The job gave her unusual access to observe interactions between American personnel, and what she witnessed shocked her more than anything else she had encountered in captivity. Captain Thompson, the camp commander, treated all soldiers with respect, regardless of color. But the white enlisted men were different. Liesl watched them ignore Jim when he reported for duty assignments, saw them laugh at private jokes that clearly targeted the black soldiers, observed the casual cruelty that seemed invisible to everyone except those experiencing it. One afternoon, a white sergeant named Miller was reviewing guard schedules. Jim stood at attention, waiting to receive his assignment. Miller made him wait 5 minutes while he chatted with white soldiers about baseball. When he finally acknowledged Jim, his tone dripped with contempt. "Clark, you take the night shift at the women's barracks again. Seems fitting." The implication was clear and disgusting. Liesl, filing papers nearby, felt anger surge through her chest. Jim's expression remained neutral, professional. "Yes, Sergeant," he said simply, and left without protest. Miller turned to another white soldier and laughed. "These boys need to remember their place." Liesl's hands shook as she filed papers. This casual racism from Americans toward their own soldiers revealed something she had not expected. Jim fought for a country that treated him with contempt. He wore the uniform with pride, despite being disrespected by the men who should have been his brothers in arms. That evening, she waited for him with new understanding. When he arrived at his post, she approached immediately. "I saw what happened today, with Sergeant Miller." Jim's jaw tightened, the first sign of anger she had seen from him. "You should not have had to see that." "How do you bear it?" she asked. "How do you maintain such dignity when they treat you that way?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the darkening sky. "Because responding with anger gives them what they want. Proof that I am what they believe me to be. So I respond with patience, with professionalism, with humanity they refuse to show me." "It is not fair," Liesl said fiercely. "No," he agreed. "It is not fair. But fairness is not something given. It is something fought for. I fight by being better than their hatred, by proving through my actions that their beliefs are lies." Liesl felt something crystallize inside her. Here was a man who faced injustice daily, yet remained kind, who endured disrespect, yet treated others with dignity, who fought for a country that did not fully accept him because he believed in its potential, and she, raised in supposed superiority, had been taught to see him as inferior. The irony was devastating. "You are stronger than anyone I have ever known," she said. "Strength is not a choice when you live in a world determined to break you," he replied. "You become strong or you become broken. I refuse to break." Over the following days, Liesl observed more carefully. She saw how black soldiers worked harder for less recognition, how they maintained equipment to higher standards, how they performed their duties with excellence that was treated as merely adequate. She watched Jim specifically, saw how he helped other soldiers regardless of color, how he volunteered for difficult assignments, how he never complained. She also saw Hildegard Weiss beginning to notice the same things. Hildegard was 30, from Berlin, quieter than Annalisa but equally steeped in Nazi ideology. Yet Liesel caught her watching the black soldiers with confusion, as if trying to reconcile what she had been taught with what she witnessed. On May 15th, Hildegard approached Liesel in the laundry. "The Negro soldiers," she said quietly, using the German term that sounded harsh in Liesel's ears now. "They are not what we were told." "No," Liesel agreed. "Nothing here is what we were told. I saw one of them help a white soldier fix his vehicle yesterday. The white soldier did not even thank him." "They show kindness to people who hate them," Liesel said. "There is strength in that, a kind of strength we were never taught to value." Hildegard nodded slowly, processing this heresy against everything they had been raised to believe. May 18th, 1945. The accusation came from Annalisa, delivered in the barracks with an audience of 12 German women. Her voice carried self-righteous fury that made Liesel's blood run cold. "You have been spending time with that Negro soldier," Annalisa announced, making the words sound like an indictment. "Every evening you walk to Building 7. You talk with him. People are noticing." Liesel felt every eye in the barracks turn toward her. The weight of judgment pressed down like physical force. She could deny it, could claim innocence, could retreat into the safety of their shared prejudices. Instead, she lifted her chin and met Annalisa's gaze. "His name is Private James Clark, and yes, I speak with him. He has been kind to me." The barracks erupted. Women spoke over each other, their voices sharp with shock and disgust. How could she fraternize with the enemy? How could she betray her race, her country, everything they stood for? Did she have no shame? "You disgrace us," Annalisa said. "You disgrace yourself. That man is using you, taking advantage of your weakness. Can you not see he seeks to humiliate you?" "He has never been anything but respectful," Liesel said, her voice shaking but firm. "He has shown me more humanity than our own government did in the war's final months." "You are a traitor," Annalisa spat. The word hung in the air like poison. Traitor. Once, that accusation would have destroyed Liesel, would have sent her scrambling to defend her loyalty. Now it felt meaningless. Traitor to what? To lies? To hatred? To a regime that had led their country to ruin? "If treating another human being with respect makes me a traitor," Liesel said slowly, "then I am proud to be one." She walked out of the barracks, her legs shaking, her heart pounding. Behind her, the women's voices rose in a chorus of condemnation. She had known this moment would come, had known her transformation would eventually demand a public stand. But knowing and experiencing were different things. She found Jim at his post an hour before their usual meeting time. He saw her face and immediately moved toward her. "What happened?" "They know. About our conversations. Annalisa called me a traitor." The words tumbled out, mixed with tears she had been holding back. Jim's expression hardened, but not with anger at her. "I should have been more careful. I did not mean to cause trouble for you." "You did not cause anything," Liesel said fiercely. "My choice to see you, to talk with you, that is mine. They are angry because I refuse to hate anymore." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That you have been kind. That you have shown me humanity." She wiped her eyes, frustrated by her tears. "Annalise says you are using me, taking advantage." "And what do you believe?" Liesel looked at him, This man who had been patient with her fear, who had offered her chocolate and conversation and a window into a different way of being. I believe you see me. Not as German or enemy or prisoner. You see Liesel, a person. That is more than anyone has offered me in years. Jim glanced around, then did something risky. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently before releasing it. The touch lasted barely 2 seconds but sent warmth flooding through her. I do see you, he said quietly. I see someone brave enough to question everything she was taught. Someone strong enough to choose kindness over hate. Someone who deserves to be seen exactly as she is. The next morning, Captain Thompson called Liesel to his office. She went expecting punishment, preparing herself for consequences. Instead, the captain regarded her with something that looked like respect. I understand there has been some tension in the barracks, he said in his careful German. Liesel nodded, waiting for the reprimand. Private Clark is one of my best soldiers, Thompson continued. He has never violated any regulation. He treats all prisoners with appropriate respect. If you have been speaking with him during your permitted outdoor time, you have broken no rules. I have not broken rules, Liesel confirmed. However, Thompson said, I must ask that you be mindful of appearances. Not for my sake, but for your safety. Some people will not understand. Some people carry old hatreds and might seek to cause trouble. I understand, sir. Thompson studied her for a long moment. You know, he said finally, the measure of a person is not where they start, but where they choose to go. Private Clark sees something worth defending in you. I am inclined to trust his judgment. Liesel left the office with tears in her eyes again. But these were different tears. For the first time in her life, authority had validated her choice to see beyond hatred. May 22nd, 1945. Camp Ruston held a social evening, a rare gathering where prisoners and guards could interact in a supervised recreational setting. The camp commander believed in humanizing captivity where possible, and these evenings featured music, simple games, and supervised conversation. Liesel attended reluctantly, aware that Annalisa and her supporters would be watching her every move. But she also knew Jim would be there, and the chance to see him in a different context pulled her forward. The gathering took place in the camp's recreation building, a large wooden structure with a piano, card tables, and enough space for 50 people. Someone had built a small fire in the outdoor pit nearby, and the May evening was warm enough that many people drifted outside. Liesel found herself near the fire with Hildegard and 2 other German women who had not joined Annalisa's campaign of judgment. They sat on wooden benches, watching American soldiers laugh and joke. The scene almost normal if you ignored the guard towers and fences. Jim was there, standing with 3 other black soldiers near the building's entrance. He caught her eye and smiled, a small private expression that made her heart stutter. She smiled back, no longer caring who noticed. As the evening progressed, people became more relaxed. Someone played. Piano inside the building, old American songs that Liesel did not recognize but found pleasant. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks into the darkening sky. Then Jim approached, moving with careful deliberation. He stopped a respectful distance away and addressed all 4 women, not just Liesel. Would you ladies like coffee? We have a fresh pot. Hildegard and the others looked at Liesel, uncertain how to respond. She made the choice for them. Yes, thank you. That would be kind. Jim returned with 4 metal cups of coffee, hot and sweet with sugar. He handed them out with that same gentle courtesy, treating each woman with equal respect. The others murmured thank you in hesitant English, and Jim nodded before returning to his friends. He is very polite, Hildegard said quietly, her tone thoughtful rather than judgmental. Yes, Liesel agreed. He is. As the evening wore on, the fire became the gathering point. More people drifted over, including Captain Thompson and several guards. Someone suggested singing, and an American soldier began a folk song about traveling home. Others joined in, their voices blending in rough harmony. During a pause between songs, Jim spoke from his position across the fire. "In Mississippi, where I am from, we have a song about hope, about believing in better days even when times are hard. May I share it?" Captain Thompson nodded permission, and Jim began to sing. His voice was rich and deep, carrying emotion that transcended language. The words spoke of crossing rivers, of finding freedom, of carrying faith through darkness. Even those who did not understand English felt the power of his song. Liesl watched him. This man who maintained dignity in the face of injustice, who offered kindness to former enemies, who sang about hope while living in a country that denied him full citizenship. The firelight played across his face, revealing both strength and vulnerability. When the song ended, silence held for several heartbeats before people began to clap. The applause felt like more than appreciation for music. It felt like acknowledgement of something deeper, something about shared humanity and the power of hope. Later, as the gathering wound down and people began returning to barracks, Liesl found herself walking alongside Jim. They had perhaps 2 minutes alone in the darkness between buildings. "Your song was beautiful," she said. "My grandmother taught me. She said music was how our people survived, how we held on to ourselves when everything else was taken." "I understand that now," Liesl said. "This need to hold on to something true when everything else is false." Jim stopped walking, and she stopped beside him. They stood close in the darkness, close enough that she could feel warmth radiating from his body. "Liesl," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to tell you something." "Yes?" "I know this is complicated. I know we come from different worlds, that people will judge us, that this might be impossible." He paused, gathering courage. "But these conversations with you, they have meant everything to me. You see me as a person, not just as my skin or my uniform. You have changed my understanding of what is possible between people." Liesl felt tears gathering again, these constant tears that came from dismantling old certainties and building new ones. May 23rd, 1945. Liesl woke knowing something important was coming. The feeling had no rational source, just instinct whispering that the day would matter. She was right. At breakfast, an announcement rippled through the mess hall. The camp would begin processing prisoners for repatriation. German women would be transferred to a staging facility in New York within 2 weeks. From there, ships would carry them back to Germany as soon as the logistics could be arranged. The news hit Liesl like physical force. 2 weeks, maybe less. Then she would be torn away from Jim, from this place where she had learned to see the world differently, from the fragile new self she was becoming. Annalisa celebrated, her face bright with triumph. "Finally, we can go home and help rebuild what the Americans have destroyed." But Liesl saw other women whose expressions mirrored her own confusion. Home meant returning to a destroyed country, to families that might be dead, to cities reduced to rubble. Home meant leaving behind the complicated truths they had learned in captivity. She could barely eat, could barely focus on her work duties. The day crawled past with agonizing slowness until finally evening came, and she could walk to Building 7. Jim was already there, waiting, his expression showing he had heard the news. 2 weeks, she said, the words barely audible. "I know." They stood in silence, the weight of impending separation crushing down on them both. Finally, Jim spoke, his voice urgent. "Come with me, just for a few minutes. I asked Captain Thompson. He gave permission for you to walk the perimeter path with me while I patrol." Liesl nodded, unable to speak, and fell into step beside him. They walked away from the buildings, toward the eastern fence where the camp bordered empty fields. The May evening was warm and clear, stars beginning to appear overhead. When they reached a spot where they could not be easily observed, Jim stopped walking. He turned to face her, and in the fading light she could see emotions playing across his face. "I do not want to lose this," he said. "Lose you." "I do not want to lose you either," she whispered. "You have shown me how to be human again, how to see beyond hatred. I do not know how to return to a world without you in it." "We could write letters," Jim suggested desperately. "Through the Red Cross, maybe. I could find you somehow when things settle." "Could you?" Liesl asked. "Could you find me in a destroyed Germany? And if you did, what then? A black American soldier and a German woman? The world would tear us apart. Maybe the world will change," Jim said. "This war, all this death. Maybe people will learn something from it." Liesl wanted to believe him, wanted to believe humanity could transform as she had transformed. But she had seen too much of human capacity for hatred to trust in easy redemption. "Tell me about your dreams," she said instead. "Tell me what you will do when you go home." Jim described his hopes with painful honesty. He would finish his service, use the GI Bill to attend college if they let black soldiers use it. He would become a teacher, maybe, or work in civil rights, fighting for his people's freedom. He would marry someday, have children, build a life of dignity and meaning. "And you?" he asked. "What will you do?" "I will go home to Dresden if there is anything left of it," Liesl said. "I will look for my family. I will try to help rebuild. But I will be different. I will carry what I learned here. I will tell other women about kindness that crossed borders, about the lies we were taught, about how it is possible to change." She took a deep breath, gathering courage for what she needed to say next. "I will tell them about you, about the black American soldier who showed mercy to his enemy, about how you taught me that humanity has nothing to do with race or nationality, about how you kissed me and everything I believed shattered and rebuilt into something better." "Liesl," Jim breathed her name like a prayer. She stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance they had maintained. "I want to kiss you," she said, her voice shaking. "Not on the cheek this time, a real kiss, so I can remember what it feels like to choose connection over hatred." "Are you certain?" Jim asked. "Because if we do this, there is no going back, for either of us." "I am certain. I have never been more certain of anything." Jim cupped her face gently in his hands, his palms warm against her skin. He gave her one last chance to change her mind, searching her eyes for doubt. Finding none, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them aware of how fragile this moment was. Then Liesl leaned into him, and it deepened, became something urgent and desperate, became two people trying to compress everything they felt into this single connection. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Liesl knew she would carry this moment forever. This kiss that defied every law of hatred she had been taught. This kiss that proved love could exist anywhere, even between enemies, even in the midst of war. "I want more," she whispered, and the words carried multiple meanings. More time, more kisses, more of this feeling that she was finally living honestly. "I want more of this, of you, of who I am when I am with you." "You will have more," Jim promised. "Maybe not with me, but you will carry this forward. You will show other people that transformation is possible, that hate can be unlearned, that human connection is stronger than propaganda." They held each other as darkness settled completely over Camp Ruston, two people from impossible circumstances finding a moment of perfect understanding. And in that embrace, Liesl felt the final pieces of her old self fall away, leaving her raw and new and ready to face whatever came next. June 3, 1945. The transport truck rolled toward the train station, carrying 16 German women away from Camp Ruston toward the staging facility in New York. Liesl pressed her face against the wooden slats one last time, watching the compound disappear behind them. Jim had not been at morning formation. She understood why. Goodbyes would have been impossible. But tucked in her pocket was a letter, passed to her by a sympathetic guard an hour before departure. She waited until the truck was moving to unfold it, her hands shaking. The handwriting was careful and clear. Jim had written in simple English, knowing her skills were limited but sufficient. The words burned themselves into her memory as she read. Dear Liesl, you changed my understanding of what people can become. I watched you shed hatred like old skin and grow into someone brave enough to see truth. You gave me hope that this war meant something, that people can learn, that love is stronger than propaganda. I will carry you with me always. Be the bridge. Tell your story. Show other women that transformation is possible, with deepest respect and affection, James. Liesl folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest. Around her, other women talked about returning home, about what they would find, about fear and hope mixed together. She remained silent, holding Jim's words close. The journey to Germany took 3 weeks. First the train to New York, then waiting in a converted warehouse with 200 other German women, then finally a converted troop ship that carried them across the Atlantic. The voyage was rough. Many women seasick, all of them anxious about what awaited. On June 26, 1945, Liesl stood on deck as the ship approached Hamburg. The city she remembered from a school trip years ago had vanished. In its place sprawled ruins, block after block of destroyed buildings, rubble piled in mountains, empty windows staring like dead eyes. This was victory's price. This was what hatred had built. The journey to Dresden took 2 more weeks, traveling through a Germany that barely existed anymore. Cities reduced to skeletons, roads cratered, bridges destroyed, people moving like ghosts through the ruins. Liesl carried 1 small bag of possessions and Jim's letter, folded and refolded until the creases threatened to tear. Dresden was worse than Hamburg. The firebombing of February had consumed the city center entirely. Liesl stood in what had been her neighborhood and could not orient herself. Every landmark was gone, every familiar building destroyed. But people lived here still, survivors carving existence from ruins. She found her mother living in the basement of what had been their apartment building. The reunion was tears and disbelief. Her father and brother were dead, killed in the final weeks of fighting. But her mother had survived, thin and aged but alive. That night, sitting in the basement by candlelight, her mother asked what had happened in America. Liesl could have lied, could have claimed harsh treatment and suffering. Instead, she chose truth. I met a man who showed me kindness, she began. A black American soldier who treated me with more dignity than our own government had. He taught me that everything we were told was lies. She told her mother about Jim, about abundance and mercy, about learning to see beyond hatred. She described the kiss that had shattered her old certainties and built new ones. She spoke of transformation through human connection rather than ideology. Her mother listened in silence, then reached out and took Liesl's hand. Tell this story, she said quietly. Tell the other women. We have been fed lies for so long. We need truth now, even when truth is difficult. Over the following months, Liesl did exactly that. In basement gatherings and breadlines, in reconstruction work crews and displaced persons camps, she told her story. She spoke of Jim's kindness, of American abundance used to heal rather than destroy, of the possibility of change. Some women rejected her testimony, clinging to old certainties because releasing them meant admitting complicity. But others listened with hunger for different truths. They asked questions, shared their own doubts, began examining beliefs they had never questioned. Hildegard appeared one day, having also returned to Dresden. They embraced like sisters, two women who had traveled the same difficult road from hatred to humanity. Together they organized informal gatherings where women could speak freely about what they had learned, what they had survived, what they hoped to build. "I want more," Liesel told each gathering, repeating the words that had become her truth. "I want more than what hatred built. I want more than what lies destroyed. I want the courage to see people as people, to choose connection over fear, to believe that transformation is possible." She carried Jim's letter in her pocket always, unfolding it when doubt threatened. His words reminded her that change was not weakness, but strength, that admitting error was the first step toward wisdom, that love could exist anywhere if people were brave enough to allow it. Dresden slowly rebuilt. Germany slowly healed. And Liesel became a bridge between what had been and what might be possible, telling her story of an impossible kiss that had taught her the most important truth. Humanity transcended every border, every prejudice, every lie. All it required was the courage to see. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.